Welcome this evening to Oak Harbor City Council's first council meeting, regular council meeting for the year 2023. We have a wonderful, lively crowd with us this evening, and it just makes these meetings a lot more fun to have somebody out there, and I'm sure you're all welcome to stay for the entire meeting, but I could probably kind of understand if you didn't also. Happy New Year. I'd like to call this first meeting to order. Hope that's not my car. It's about the location of where it's at. Let me see.
Did the valet mess up?
And if it is my car, it'll shut off, I guess, in time, right? Anyway, tonight I'd like to invite you to stand and join us in an invocation led by Pastor Matthew Erickson, Hope Church, who is here substituting for Pastor David Parker. Immediately following the invocation, I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pastor Matthew.
All right, thank you. Normally I get the opportunity to pray at Rotary meetings and whatnot. It's awesome to be promoted to varsity today, so thank you for inviting me. I would encourage you to prepare yourself in the manner and the tradition in which you are accustomed. God, thank you for this day, God of justice and of mercy. Thank you for the gift of life, the opportunity to serve the people of our city. Lord, help us to act with character and with conviction. Help us to listen with understanding and goodwill. Help us to speak with charity and with restraint. Give us a spirit of service this evening and remind us that we are stewards of your authority. Guide us to be the leaders your people need. Help us to see the humanity and dignity of those who disagree with us, and to treat all persons, regardless of difference, with the reverence your creation deserves. And finally, God, renew us with the strength of your presence and with the joy of helping to build a community worthy of the human person. We ask this as your sons and daughters, confident in your goodness and love. Amen.
Appreciate your words, Pastor Erickson. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So tonight's meeting is being streamed live on YouTube and Facebook, and will be broadcast on cable channel 10, HD 1090 following the meeting. Attendees are participating in person and via teleconference. Guests that are included in staff presentations will be excused from the Ring Central meeting at the conclusion of the agenda item as appropriate. I'd like to call on our City Clerk, Julie, to call the roll, please, at this time. Clerk
Thank
Julie?
you, Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem Heisen.
Present.
Councilmember Munns.
Present.
Councilmember Wiesner.
Present.
Councilmember Stuckey.
Present.
Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
Present.
Councilmember Marshall.
Present.
Mayor, Councilmember Evans has asked to be excused this evening.
Okay, thank you, Clerk Julie. I'll entertain a motion to excuse Councilmember Evans. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
I move to excuse Councilmember Evans.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to excuse Councilmember Evans from tonight's meeting. Motion was Mayor Pro Tem Heisen, second was Councilor Munns. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Looks like that passes unanimously. I can't see Mr. Wiesner's, but I'll bet it was up to. It was, good, good. Any suggested changes to the agenda in tonight's meeting? And seeing none, hearing none, then it'll be approved as presented. And we will just move on to the second item on our agenda, which is a community presentation. And this evening we have for our presentation our Oak Harbor School District Superintendent Michelle Kuss-Cybula. And welcome, and it's sure good to see you.
Great, thank you so much. So with me tonight, I have Dwight Lundstrom, which many of you know is the Assistant Superintendent. So it's the Dwight and Michelle show tonight, so thank you for your time. I understand we have 10 minutes. I'm from New York, so I can talk pretty fast, so I'll keep it under 10 minutes. So we are here tonight to represent, I believe, important work in our community. It's not just about the school district, but I believe it's about establishing for future generations, not just our current students. So we really want to talk about our bond measure that's on the ballot. So thanking all of you for allowing us to be here tonight. So on our bond coming up, we have 3 big projects. We have 2 that are DOD funded by 80% if we get matching funds of 20%, which is 2 schools, so Hand in Hand Home Connection, as well as Crescent Harbor Elementary. I also want to talk about a new school to really help offset our growth capacity. We are billowing out at our elementary schools and needing space for our students, and we have been for years. So a 3rd school would be brought on with some funding from the state. And then we have enhancement measures. All of these were as a result of, as you know, last year in February, we went out for a bond and our community told us we were asking for too much money. Many of you I met with this summer, many people in our community I met with, and we heard one of the things that came back and reverberated was, you're asking for too much. Your bond is not specific to the ask, so narrow it down and be clear with what you want. So I want to be very clear tonight in our 10 minutes, probably 8 now, is what our ask is. We also have an opportunity as One Oak Harbor to really partner not only with the city on some of these endeavors that we'll talk about. Our community stakeholders are not just our voters, but I think all of us for the future of the community, as well as our military that is here and is really supportive of this DOD funding. And I know, Mayor, you had flown back and advocated for this funding many years ago, and we're now starting to see with 20% match that we can make this dream become a reality for our students of this community. So we have overcrowding that has occurred in many of our schools, which is the conversation I want to talk a little bit about, is our new school over at the Fort Nugent site. And I know there's been a lot of conversations, and I'm very excited, and thank you to Blaine for all of your conversations. I think, again, we're on this precipice of being able to bring our community together, bring the city and the school district together on behalf of our students, and really talk about what's our future growth and what does that look like for future field space. So we've had many conversations, and I'm so excited and optimistic at our partnership that's going to continue with this conversation. So the 3rd school on our list, which will be the last one, is the new school over at Fort Nugent, which will house approximately 700 students. So it really offsets the crowding that is occurring with all of our portables that are older than some of you sitting up there. And we've had students in them for many, many years. I also want to get a nod to our community that many, many years ago, we asked them to support a renovation of the high school, which Dwight was the principal, and we have paid that off. So that bond is paid off this December, last year in 2022, was paid off now that we're in 2023. So this is a new bond for us with no debt, and we're really looking at this as an opportunity. We also have the Oak Harbor Elementary site. There's been some confusion. That was the feedback from the bond. I want to point to the fact that these buildings are very old. They were older actually than the high school renovation that was 20 years ago when we started asking the community to support a bond then. So we have elementary schools older than that are really in need of repair. So Dwight's going to talk a little bit about what that Oak Harbor Elementary is, and again, our power for One Oak Harbor.
So one of the things that we've talked about, or we've learned in our community as we've been talking, is one, we know the historic building at the Oak Harbor Elementary site is valued by our community, and we want to retain it. It never has been on the block to remove it. So, and it's in wonderful condition. And then we also have a building that was built in 1983 that's got a lot of life left in it, and it's in really good condition. And so after COVID, what we really discovered was that there's a really big need for daycare. And we're hoping to be able to partner with community groups that can and provide space to provide daycare for our community, because we are, as you know, we're very short. The military says, I think, that we're about hitting 15% of what is needed in our community just for our military population. And so we really want to work on that as a community partnership. And then the other thing about the interior space of where Oak Harbor Elementary sits is there's a lot of green grass, and we would like to partner. We've talked to City Administrator Oborn about using some of that space for community fields, and we've been talking to the North Whidbey Soccer Club about providing spaces, because they have a concern about the Fort Nugent site and losing space for their programs. And so we want to make sure that we're working all together, because we're in this together, to provide spaces for our kids in our community. And it only serves our kids that we have in our district well. So,
Yeah, thank you, Dwight. So I also want to talk a little bit about Crescent Harbor and Hand in Hand Home Connection. We have many different programs in both. So Crescent Harbor Elementary, the DoD project would be built on site in the back of the property, so we don't lose any instruction time. Again, that's 80% reimbursable. We're very excited about that opportunity. Not many schools in the country are picked for that, and again, it had to come with advocacy. We're standing on the shoulders of giants that this was a dream, and now it's a possible reality by this bond project, is to make that happen for Crescent Harbor and Hand in Hand Home Connection. We have many portables on that site, and we'd like to get our kids under one roof. We've heard that by the safety enhancements from our community when we did a survey this fall to not only staff concerned about the safety needs as well as our community and parents. So Oak Harbor Elementary would be built in the back of the site, which allows us to build and keep kids in school and then flip that site. We also have the aging facility at Hand in Hand Home Connection. We have many programs that are housed there. So if you think about a college campus, people coming and going at all hours, that's Hand in Hand Home Connection, and we feel strongly in that program. Our principal of that program has done a tremendous job, and those families are very dedicated to that program, which is another bonus. During the pandemic, many people went remote and then returned every kid to a classroom. We have a lot of options for our families to choose what method of education works for them, so we're very proud of that. But they're also overcrowded. We have daycare and preschool there, and we could have more, but we don't have space for it. So there's a waiting list that's pretty extensive. So Hand in Hand Home Connection would be built on also DoD property, remove it from the flight path and bring it off to Regatta, so by OVE where Olympic View right now is. And then the last thing we want to talk about, which is a big thing, is how much are we asking for? So with our bond paid off, we have no bond currently. We are asking for 30 cents less than what we ended our last bond at for property tax. But I want to talk about an investment. So for every dollar contributed from a taxpayer, we get 96 cents on return. So every dollar invested, we get 96 cents from DoD and from the state. So that's an incredible amount of money that is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And I can tell you, Dwight and I building high schools both. I built two, one in Oregon and one in Bellingham. And you can't build one high school for that amount of money today. So we're asking for 3 schools and safety enhancements for the security of each and every one of our schools, which has single entry and secure entry for every single one of our schools in the district, which was a high need. We've done what we could with the money we have, but now we need an extra bit to get us over to that last hurdle. So 96 cents for every dollar contributed, which is a pretty good deal. And total, with that 96 cents in every dollar invested, it's a total project of $237 million. We're asking the community for $121 million for that to access the matching funds. We also have exempt status. We want to make sure people understand that. And we want to talk about registered voters.
So in the last election, what we knew was we had older voters, and I say older, and it's my demographic that participated in that, and not a lot of our school-age families, but a lot of people didn't understand what that bonds are for building. They have nothing to do with, they don't go into salary or any of those kinds of things, and we're just asking for support.
So we know that every vote matters, and so we're here to just encourage people to register to vote and to conveniently just put it back in your mailbox when you do receive a ballot. And we're really asking for our community to make sure if they have questions, ask. We only get stronger with our information when we know that there's misinformation or information that's not getting out there. So if you're hearing anything, please let us know. We want to be transparent, and we want to continue our partnerships with the city. We think that's a better investment of our community is stronger partnerships and really thinking together about, we have long-term thinking and plans, not only about options for buildings in our community, which attracts people to our community. When we think about it, that when we have strong school systems and buildings, we attract people that want to stay here and invest back in our community. So working together, One Oak Harbor is really thinking about envisioning what we can do today to impact the future of tomorrow. So thank you so much for your time. We have a couple things to hand out. We have State of the Schools, which we'll talk about our budget and where we are. That's coming up January 11th, so if you'd like to come. And we also have our two-sider that we sent out about a month ago. Any questions for us?
So I'll turn to council at this time and see if anybody here might have a question.
Councilmember Wiesner has his hand raised, Mayor.
Councilmember Wiesner has his hand, so Councilor Wiesner?
Thank you, Mayor. My apologies for not being on the video tonight. I'm in a kind of low bandwidth area, but I just wanted to comment what a great opportunity we have here to gain 3 new state-of-the-art facilities. I can certainly attest that I attended each of the facilities we're talking about that are affected here. Oak Harbor Elementary, of course, I went to first grade in the section of the school that was built in 1938, and I can remember some cold winters in those buildings. And don't get confused, I did not go to school in 1938. I went to school in the building that was built in 1938. And, and certainly I can remember, Crescent Harbor built in the 60s. When I went there, it was kind of this cool facility that had this curved roof, and it was real state of the art. But I will tell you that was in the 60s, and certainly, the fact that we're able to come up with a way to replace that community ball field space, I think is just really neat, and to bring some of those community fields into this core of our city, near where we have some existing fields in the pool and senior services and some other city resources, I think is just a win-win. But great opportunity for our city to gain these 3 new state-of-the-art facilities, and I appreciate all the work the school board has done in listening to the people of the community and working with the city, and this is a great opportunity. Thanks much.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilor Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. I remember Mr. Lungson being in DC when the snow hit and most everybody didn't come in, and trudging, and you ran into our group, and we went and worked with some staffers for some of our legislators that were there, and tried to convince them, which seemed to work that time. But I am proud to say that for 15 years I have been on council, we have always supported the bonds. And this is a way to get out factual information. We're not telling people how to vote, but we're saying we approve of it, we support it, and a strong city needs strong schools. And really glad to see this. And you're right, an opportunity to have the federal government and state pay for 80% of 2 schools is phenomenal. Is phenomenal. And we just can't waste that opportunity, I don't think. And the idea of when the city needed more recreation space, you let us use some of Fort Nugent. And it was the Navy that built that park. And so they have also been contributors along the way too. And now you need that land back, and it is very important. And we shouldn't think to be selfish. We've had it, for $1 rent for how many years now? I mean, come on, guys. This is special to have this working relationship. And now they're trying to help us again to find more space to put things, because we didn't have that 75-acre park that we're still trying to find funds for, but at least we have the land secure. So I am really glad that you came and gave your time. I'm really excited to see so many people here tonight. I know a lot. I remember teaching with State Representative and City Councilman Sucre Hollis, and we had buckets in our room for North Woodby when it rained too much. And so when they say, they're not crying wolf, that they need new schools, we need to listen as a community and as a council. And I'm proud to be able to help further the education for this and to support this resolution tonight. So thank you, and thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Munns. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I was one of those students dodging the buckets in the hallway. I'm educated 1st through 12th in Oak Harbor, and had the, I'll say, pleasure of attending Crescent Harbor and Clover Valley, and what was then the middle school and the junior high and then high school. And in that entire 12 years, there was never a levy passed. And I remember very distinctly what that felt like as a student, to be dodging the buckets and the leaking and having to have class in the cafeteria because our carpets were infested. It was just, and for that levy to fail year after year, I remember as a student what that felt like. And that really stuck with me, and that is one of the reasons why the school district will always have my support, whether from on the bench or as a voter, for sure. You opened your presentation by saying that you do, quote, some important work in our community, and I would argue that you do the most important work in our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Hoffmeyer.
First of all, it's so nice to see nearly 50 people in here that don't have pitchforks and torches. That's quite
We're on to
amazing.
76, right?
Now,
We haven't voted yet. There's still time, man.
that's what I was getting at, right? I first moved to Oak Harbor July 12th of 1999. I think one of the very first people I met in town was Anna Chargaloff. Still with you guys, right? I think it was probably the Oak Harbor high school that I first fell in love with. When we first came here, it was only going to be for 1 year, and somehow it turned into 23 and a half years. I think PE teacher was probably Mr. Biddle. English teacher might have been Coach Waller or somebody. I mean, the reason you remember those names 23 years or 83 years later is because they made a difference. And it's the career and technical program that the Oak Harbor High School has. Individuals like Tom Mueller is the reason that I've been able to be successful in life and make it to this point. I have 2 children, a 17-year-old that has went most of the way through the Oak Harbor school system, Broadview Elementary, shout out to them. What a special school. And an 18-month-old. And, Legend was born during the filing week for my council seat here. And it was really, that was the call to action. That was the catalyst for me to run was, I've got to do it for him. We've got to step up to make things better. And the reason that I support the school bond and the reason that I will always support the Oak Harbor School District is for the kids. So my challenge to you all, seeing the manpower that you guys have, it would be very easy to knock on every door in the next couple of weeks. Challenge 1. Challenge 2, and I think that's to the voters. Surely we're better than to have our kids going to school in trailers. Surely we're better. Maybe there's no perfect time to raise taxes. But this can't be put off any further either. So that's why I'm so supportive. And I was commenting to Michelle before this presentation here. I remember a similar presentation about a year ago, and this has a very different feel. I certainly feel like you guys have made strides towards understanding and hearing why there was a no last time. And it feels like you're a lot closer to yes, and I hope we get there. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Councillor Stuckey.
Well, this is the 3rd time I've heard your presentation, which is a good thing. It means you're getting out. I'm sure I'll hear it 1 or 2 more times. I don't have a story of growing up in Oak Harbor. I didn't grow up here, but my son is, and my son has some special needs, and this is a wonderful school district for that. He went to Hand. He still talks about Principal Evans. I see you back there. I'm going to have to tell him you said hello, because every time, Principal Evans! I do have one question, though, that it's come up. As leaders, it's not unusual for us to get questions. The one school, it's the 7% match, not the 80%. Mm-hmm. Some might say it's almost like you're trying to sneak one in there. How would be a good way to address the concerns about that? Because what I don't want to see is, if for some reason this fails, then you go the next time, and then you just stick to the 80%. So what is the best way to get people past that only 7% match? I'm just trying to help educate folks.
So Oak Harbor Elementary, because of the proximity between Olympic View and Oak Harbor Elementary, our school boundaries are quite interesting. If you go to our district site, they're weird because some of the Oak Harbor Elementary families are bussed clear from Scenic Heights area. And what we want to do is get a school closer to the population and be able to reboundary our district so that it makes sense, so kids have neighborhood schools. So that's number 1. Number 2 is Oak Harbor Elementary, the south building, so that one was built in, Brian? 48. That one, we have put enough glue and duct tape and screws into it that we're running out of places to fix it. It's worn out. The windows, there's just so much that needs to be done on it that the state won't even reimburse us money there. So the 7% match given to us by the state will only go to a new facility, not to reconditioning that facility. And then I think the other thing, the number of the other thing people don't realize is when all-day kindergarten came into play, the state didn't give us more money for schools, and so we've outgrown our schools because we have kindergartners that 10 years ago, or may not even have been 10 years ago, were only in our schools half days. So we had twice the number of kids in one space that we do now, and so they're in school all day. So we need another school. We're not trying to slip it in. We have the need for space because we want to get kids out of portables, as Councilman Hoffmeyer said. And when you have portables on your campuses, they have to go outside to get to a restroom, which is in the original building. Our gyms didn't get bigger, our libraries didn't get bigger, and our cafeterias didn't get bigger. So we're cramming more kids into spaces that were never designed for that many students. So does that answer your question, Mr. Stuckey?
It does help. Thank
Okay.
you. I appreciate that. And thank you all for what you do.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I just have to say a couple things. To the voter who says, or did say, oh gosh, these taxes that just keep going up, that argument doesn't fly, right? I mean, their taxes are not going up. I don't think I've ever heard of a 96% match. I mean, I've looked at a lot of these things, and and you're doing some exciting this idea about providing daycare, another service that we so badly need. I hear that out at NAS every time I'm there, once a month, and I hear that as one of their top needs. I mean, you're hitting the target here in so many ways. I'm excited about this vote coming up soon. I mean, our partnership is hugely important to myself and my chair and all of us in the city, our partnership with you. So go get them, and anything I can do, I will. So, and I'll be out there as much as I can.
Thank you.
You bet. So thank you to each and every one. I know that we've got a vote coming, I think, in our consent agenda. So perhaps I can bring that to your open house and present that to you.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, just appreciate it. Go
Yeah.
OH School District. Okay, we'll move on then. On our agenda, the next item is our citizen comment period. This is a time when citizens may comment on consent agenda items or subjects of interest not listed on the agenda at this time. Citizens will have the opportunity to comment on the remaining agenda items during the meeting as appropriate. Citizens can also visit our website prior to our meetings for methods to submit public comment or contact the city clerk, Julie Nestor, by phone or email as noted here. And I think we're going to have that up in just a minute as our contact and a way to contact. When submitting comments, please include your name and address. Public comment sent anonymously will be shared with the mayor and council, but will not be displayed. We received one comment from the public since our last regular meeting, which I think we're going to display on our screen. And then at this time, I will ask if there are any present this evening who wish to speak to items not listed on the agenda or on the consent agenda. If so, the clerk will call your name. If you signed in, and if you didn't, you can still have an opportunity to come speak to us. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Step to the microphone and state your name and address. So we do have one, and I believe that's up now, okay? Yes, I think we've got that one well read now, and looks like Mr. Hoffmar's got a special request there, so.
They might be easier to work with than most cards.
So turn to those present. Anyone wishing to speak? If not, then we'll move on to our next agenda item, okay? And that is Section 4, Consent Agenda. Staff has presented the listed consent agenda items, all of which were included in the meeting packet. If there are no objections or changes, that consent agenda will be approved as presented. And I do believe that we do have a resolution endorsing the Oak Harbor School District. And so, Councilor Munns, you want to pull that and read it? Since we still have a number of people here from the school district?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
I didn't give you a lot of warning. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's all
but-
right. I gotta get through the bills first. Well, I'm not finding it. Thanks. I'd be happy to read it. And I also will be really excited when you can take this to them to be presented at the meeting on the 11th also. Resolution 2301, a resolution of the City of Oak Harbor endorsing the Oak Harbor School District bond. Whereas the Board of Directors of the Oak Harbor School District, the board, has determined that aging and educationally outdated infrastructure and school facilities, school safety and security needs, and the need to improve educational opportunities require the district to construct a new Crescent Harbor Elementary School, construct a new elementary school on Fort Nugent site, construct a new hand-in-hand home connection facility, and make the district-wide safety and security improvements, all as particularly defined and described in Section 2, wherein collectively the project. Whereas the Oak Harbor School District has a record to be proud of as a parent in maintaining its quality facility, its broad and diverse educational program, and highly qualified staff, in its successful student, state, and national awards, record high graduation rates, and its history of fiscal responsibility. Whereas Oak Harbor Public School students' successes are directly tied to and dependent upon the community investment through its locally collected and locally controlled levies and bonds, whereas Oak Harbor Public School enrollment has increased to nearly 6,000 full-time students and continued growth is expected. Whereas the board has successfully paid off the current bond voted and approved in 2006 on time and under budget, construction and remodeling Oak Harbor High School, career and technical spaces, and a state-of-the-art performing arts center. Whereas the Oak Harbor Public Schools will place a new bond measure on the February 2023 ballot measure that reads as following. The Oak Harbor School District, number 201, capital improvement and school construction general obligation bond, $121,000. Board of Directors, Oak Harbor School District, number 201, adopted resolution number 20-07 concerning a proposition to finance a capital improvement for student safety educational facilities. This proposition will authorize the district to replace existing facilities by construction a new Crescent Harbor Elementary, a new elementary school at Fort Nugent, and a new hand-in-hand home connection facility, make district-wide safety, security improvement issues no more than 121,000, thousand of general obligation months maturing million within 20 years of the levy, access property taxes levies to pay such bonds as provided by resolution 20-01. Whereas the City of Oak Harbor provided notice of this resolution as required by law on its January 3rd, 2023 City Council agenda, and also required by law provided equal time for all citizens to give input concerning this resolution, including but not limited to express the views in both favor and in opposition to this resolution, and the ballot measure. Whereas the city of Oak Harbor maintains commitment to the proud traditions of providing quality education for our children, now therefore be it resolved, the mayor, the city council of Oak Harbor endorse the Oak Harbor Public School District bond measure on February 14th, 2023, and encourage all residents to register and vote in this election. Passed by the city council the third day of January 2023. Will be signed by the mayor, Robert Severns, and our clerk, Julie Nestor. And it's 121 million, so, thank you. Yep.
Thank you, Councilor Munns. Appreciate that. And thanks again to the school district. I'm not going to even say good luck. You're not going to need it, so. We'll move on to mayor's comments at this time, and I think we have, that'll be followed by council comments, and I'll start off by saying that the city welcomes Steve McCaslin as our Economic Development Coordinator. This is Steve's official first day with the city. Welcome aboard, Steve. Also make a comment about our storm damage that we've recently had here in Oak Harbor. Island County Emergency Management shared this post, I assume that's coming here, which citizens can find on the city's Facebook and Instagram pages. If you incurred damage to your home or business during the most recent King Tide event, you may be eligible for state disaster assistance. You can submit an initial damage assessment form online by visiting the websites displayed on the screen or by calling the Department of Emergency Management. Residents are not filing a claim by providing information. This process is not a guarantee residents will receive financial assistance from the state. However, there is an opportunity that you should take advantage of. City of Oak Harbor storm damage. At this time, we've asked our Parks and Recreation Director, Mr. Brian Smith, and our Public Works Director, Mr. Steve Schuler, to give us an update on the recent storm damage from the perspective of parks, streets, storm and floodwater and utilities. Brian and Steve?
Yeah, good
Yes,
evening,
Brian?
Mr. Mayor and members of council. I'm Brian Smith, Parks and Recreation Director. Just to give you a quick little overview, summary of the damage that we saw and what we are doing right now after the King Tides. You can go to the next slide. Just give a brief background for benefit of the public. King Tide, as most of us know, it's a non-scientific term for the highest predicted high tide of the year above highest water level reached at high tide on an average day. So heavy rains and storm surge can exacerbate that and cause flooding, some bluff erosion, and groundwater intrusion, which Steve will talk about. In our area, we usually see about an 8 to 9 foot tidal swing. This occurs about 1 to 2 times a year. And these are usually predicted by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. King tides also are preview on how sea levels will rise and affect coastal places. So as time goes by, the water level reached now during a king tide will be the water level reached at high tide on an average day into the future, which is something that we need to look at as we plan for future development. It's interesting if you look at the NOAA Office for Coastal Management and the Washington State area level rise data projection modules show a 1 foot rise in tidal levels in the next 30 years. That's something that we have to consider as we look at some of these impacts. So to just go briefly about what we saw the week before last, during this last king tide, in the marina, you can go to the next slide there. In the marina, we did have a log boom fail on the north side. So the marina was inundated with logs. Staff are working on clearing them out. We have the bulk of them cleared out now. We are repairing the old log boom and just waiting for some parts to install the new one. Wiring for the fuel dock was saturated, but staff were able to repair that. You can go next slide. At Flintstone Park, the pier went underwater, which is not something that we had seen before. There was no damage that we can see. Shoreline has some broken concrete armoring, so there wasn't a lot of scouring happening along the shoreline. The boardwalk between Flintstone and Windjammer saw driftwood mostly, and staff are also checking the electrical, which went underwater during this event. You can go next slide. At Windjammer Park, the bridge is closed off currently until we can get it inspected. We still have logs jammed underneath the bridge. It needs to be dredged, some of that sand and logs pulled out. Likely to have one more good storm surge tidal event before the season is up, so we're kind of waiting for that, and then we'll work on completing that dredging work. The lagoon dock rose off its pilings and appears to be undamaged. We do have it blocked off until water levels recede. Right now it's still about a foot high, and then we'll do some inspection on that and reopen it. The Little League fields did see some flooding as well. We still have some standing water there, but we're not needing to pump any more out. Two sections of the path west of the bridge did go underwater. We had the section just west of the path and also the boat ramp area, which we use for emergency access for the fire department. So our staff was out there for about 3 hours with excavators and shoveling to reopen those sections for access. Usually we have more tree loss during an event like this, but staff have done a really good job at mitigating that, and so we didn't see any tree loss during this event. One thing I want to point out here, so on the left here is beforehand, we have about 3.5 feet of sloped shoreline that go up to the pathway. That was completely scoured out during this last event. We lost all of that and have, and that event scoured out about 6 to 7 inches underneath the pathway. So we actually had to look at compacting that back in with fill, and then we'll do some sandbagging for an expedited mitigation with that. We're meeting with the Department of Fish and Wildlife on site later this week with engineering to look at what a more long-term solution to protect that shoreline is going to look like. If you go to the next slide, you'll see a good video of what happened here that scoured out all that 3.5 feet there that we lost. So you had the tide pushing the logs right up against there. If you go to the next slide, so this is more of an example of what we would look at in the future with some armoring or protection, hardscape protection, just to protect that pathway. And we have the splash pad and little water park right on the other side of that path. So for right now, we are working on some just temporary mitigation measures, and then we'll come back with council with a site plan for long-term erosion protection.
Thank you. And Tim, I just have one slide if you want to go to that. It's a map. And I'm very excited because we're going to need good students in the future to address some of these problems as they continue to impact. So I'm glad you're all here today so you can get an early start on this because it's going to take some time. So as Tim just goes to that, on each of your dais there's the map, and this is the U.S. FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency's special flood hazard area. And as you can see from this map, it's kind of hard to see, but you can see Beeksma, all this area that's in blue, whenever the tide gets to about 13-foot elevation, and this last king tide was about 13.3, 13.4, all that area in blue can get inundated. And so we have this January 24th on Tuesday, we're going to have another 13.5 tide coming. So we should expect the same. Now it depends on, as Brian mentioned, it depends on which way the wind's blowing, how hard it's blowing, what other barometric pressure, all those things play into it. It's fairly complex. And so you can see Dillard's Additions, you can see all of Windjammer Park, you can see parts of Pioneer Way, all get inundated and are part of this area that's part of this, let's call it 13-foot elevation, that once we hit that, the water just starts to come in. What's our role as Public Works? Our role as Public Works is really to try to keep the roads open, and so we do that through pumping. We had 2 major pump stations going on. When we can't keep up with the flows, then we need to close the road, and so those are really our main focuses. We also look at protecting our property, for example, Windjammer Park, And then private landowners are responsible for protecting and pumping out the water that gets onto their property, and we certainly coordinate as closely as we can with them during these emergencies. So again, my message is we should expect more of this. I just wanted to read very briefly, lastly, just some of the direction that's coming out regarding how you address this, just so we're aware. In the past, hard armoring, and that's kind of the rock walls that we often see, and the vertical bulkheads that are all over this island. In the past, hard armor was the most common technique used for coastal erosion control in the Puget Sound region. But due to changing permit requirements and increased scrutiny by regulators, they are now rarely installed on new installations. And this is because as they've taken a look at both the ecological and geomorpholic, and we'll need to have some science teachers explain what geomorpholic means, but that's really how you try to engineer one area. All you do is you just send all that energy and damage downstream, and you just cause impact to your neighbors. And so that's what that really means. And so most of these have been prohibited, and now, and only when there's a direct impact to a major infrastructure are they allowed to put in harm armoring. It doesn't mean that it won't happen. It doesn't mean that we can't pursue that, but other solutions need to be installed, and those include, putting in more softer things where you move in essence, your shoreline back and provide a buffer zone. And so I just want to make sure council is aware that that's kind of things that you'll start to hear about as we move forward. So any questions for Mr. Smith or I before we move over to other mayor comments and council comments?
Councilor Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. Clean water facility. We have to protect that. So is there something maybe a little different we'll be able to do with that to keep it from being damaged?
You're right. That clean water facility goes quite deep into the ground. So it's constantly getting pressure just from the groundwater itself. So it performed fairly well. So we've got those systems in place to protect it is the short answer. But it'll be constantly under barrage, and we will constantly have to monitor it. Yes.
Thank you both, Brian and Steve. Appreciate your input tonight. Still under mayor comments, the Washington State Ferries is hosting a virtual community meeting. Looks like a couple of them on service restoration. Riders and other community members are encouraged to attend upcoming virtual community meetings designed to provide updates about the ferry system. Two events, both covering the same information, are Wednesday, January 11th at 12:30 p.m. and Thursday, January 12th at 6 p.m. Washington State Ferry staff will discuss the ferry system service restoration progress, ongoing efforts to address workforce challenges, as well as updates on key projects. So holiday closure, city offices will be closed on January 16th in observance of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. The Association of Washington Cities City Action Days is coming in February on the 15th and 16th in Olympia. And at this point, Councilmembers Hoffmeyer and Wiesner, as well as City Administrator Blaine Oborn and myself, are signed up to attend that in Olympia. And then also in March is the National League of Cities Conference. That takes place in Washington, D.C. Now with COVID behind us, they are going to have that conference again full bore, and that is March 26, 27, and 28 of this year, 2023. Council members Stuckey, Hoffmeyer, and Wiesner are planning to attend. So they'll look forward to that. In the meeting packet is the proposed listing of council member service to boards and committees submitted for council approval. The list for service in 2023 is unchanged from 2022, except to add the current council member participation on the Arts Commission. So that is up for discussion. In fact, at this time, if you would like to ask me or ask any questions, or if you want to swap with somebody else, I guess you could tell us that too. Otherwise, we'll move forward like we have in 2022. Thumb Russell? Did you have a question, Councillor Stuckey? Okay.
I have two questions, actually. I have noticed, a lot of these boards have a council member assigned to them, but there are times where a council member cannot make it, but there is not an alternate on there. Is there some way to have an alternate on all of these in case a council member cannot participate? I mean, we can always show up, of course.
I
but-
certainly would entertain that idea. Sure, I think it's a great idea. So at this point, we've got a couple of committees with more than one counselor on it, but those that have only one, and I don't know about the Northwest Clean Air, but I can tell you that we will look into that and try to add and communicate with you going forward for those of you that have only one committee that you're on. If you have another one that you would like to serve on, especially as an alternate, we'll reach out to you. I think that's a good idea.
And I do have one other question. We do have our new economic development person, and when we voted for that, I mean, one thing we mentioned was the tangibility of that position. I mean, the economic development person need to make tangible strides in economic development. Is there any thought of having a board or committee dedicated to that economic development as well? Another place for our new economic development person to report to besides just council. Is that a thought or maybe a possibility?
Certainly, I would imagine without discussion with other council that it's a possibility. It has not been discussed at the administration level yet, but we'll certainly do so. So, Mr. Olborn, I hope you're taking good notes.
Yes, and the plan is quarterly reports, so let's let the first quarterly report kind of come on and see if we want to do further development. We've talked about a task force. The county's going to do what's something called the SIDS, a Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Plan, that will play a role in, and that'll really do a lot of outreach and do a lot of things that a task force might do. So let's kind of play out those two things and see whether we need a separate task force.
Okay, anyone else? Input or questions about that? Okay, then I'll turn to council for council comments. Councilor Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, I still look at the audience here and marvel that there's 3 former council members still sitting out there. I think that's pretty cool. Which takes me to the Economic Development Coordinator position, and I think I've seen a slide for that, so I'm hoping we can bring that back up. It for quite some time had been a top priority of council to have an Economic Development Coordinator person here, and this council was fortunate enough to have a few things break our way to where we were able to make that past goal happen. And, I really think this is a great moment for the city. And, if you look at our list of 32 goals, it wasn't as big as it sounds. If you look at our list of goals, having somebody dedicated to that economic development, really, this council is very hopeful that can allow some of that to happen quicker than it otherwise would. And I think our goal there was intentional economic development, that it really wasn't something that was going to happen on its own. And wish Mr. McCaslin much luck. And thank you to staff for getting this done.
Councilor Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. Island Transit recently did a trip down to Palm Springs to look at hydrogen fuel buses, and then also their electric buses. They're having to make a decision on how states are ruling money to be spent, and so we are having it analyzed and is that feasible and how will we get the hydrogen fuel and stuff? So that's interesting. They've expanded their routes to Saturday, and Sunday is coming, or a few's on Sunday. The snow was havoc, and so they had a hard time keeping their regular routes, so don't give up on them. They try, and then when the water came, they also, so please check their website and also their Facebook page on that. But exciting things, and they're in the process of getting funds to help build a new large station down on the south end so we can keep buses there. We have buses that are kept on Camano Island, so they don't have to go back and forth. And if we have one on the south end, then that would help. And especially if there's trouble with the roads or that are impassable, then they can still get some of it. So anyway, that's the exciting news from Island Transit.
Thank you, Councilor Munns. Anyone else for council comments? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on then to, gosh, I think it's the last item on our agenda for this evening. Item number 10A, land use fees. And for this, we have our Development Services Director, Mr. David Cool. Mr. Cool? What an entry.
Thank you, Mayor. We made it from next door. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'd like to present a little something on land use fees. And so we have an automatic kicker in our code, and that's why we're here tonight, and we'll go through some of this over time. So tonight, first we'd like to cover some background material for you. That material will include a snapshot of the budget for the 4 years period from 21 to 24. Next, we will cover the code sections that apply. And so code sections are kind of dry, but we'll go through that. And then last, staff would like to share 4 options for you. So the first part, this code section, the purpose of this subchapter is to provide a consolidated and consistent set of filing fees for all land use development permit applications, which will best satisfy the following needs. And these 3 items are something for you to keep in mind as we're talking about fees. A, provide a single convenient listing for all land use development permit application fees for the general public and city staff. B, provide a greater degree of consistency and equity in setting fees. And C, collect sufficient revenues to offset a reasonable share of the costs incurred by the city in reviewing and approving each type of land use development permit application. So keep those terms in mind. Reasonable share of costs is something to think about as we go forward. This particular chart is something that Mr. Goldman put together for us, the General Fund Development Services report. In 2021, the actual total revenue for our department was $436,975. Our total expense to run the department was $1,161,251. And so the total that was not covered by dedicated revenues is $724,276. For 2022, the projected numbers, the 22 numbers are not quite done yet, but the total revenue is forecast to be $262,500. The total expense is forecast $1,188,559. And so the total that's not covered by dedicated revenues is $926,099. 2023 forecast ahead. The total revenue is $439,500, and that number is a little higher because of grant revenue. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. The audience, virtual and here, may not know where does that revenue come from. That the total revenue was only, $439,500, but yet the expense was almost $1.5 million. So you might, they're just going, well, so we have jobs and people work and they get salary, but just maybe a little bit, please.
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember Munns. our particular city, we run with a general fund type of budget. And so the money all comes in from property taxes and sales taxes into a general fund, and then it's distributed out to various departments. The fire department, the police department, various other sources get money out of the general fund. What we're showing here is we're not an enterprise fund. An enterprise fund is the type where all the revenue equals the expenses and it breaks even. So that's not the type of accounts that we run here in the Development Services Department. And so the land use fees are intended to offset most of our costs, but not all of them. So in 23, as you can see, it will be $1,032,687 that's not covered by dedicated revenues. And in 24, the total revenue is forecast at $1,155,000. Total expense is $2,242,549. So the total that's not covered is $1,087,549. Those numbers are bigger in 24 because of grant funding. So we anticipate about an $800,000 or $900,000 grant to come through for the 2 lots that we hope to buy and do the environmental work on those 2 lots. So that's about $800,000 or $900,000 to do that. So that's why both the revenue and the expense are higher than what we're used to every year. So land use fees, Section 5, Annual Permit Fee Review. This is the slide and why we're here. Annually, on the 1st of January, the Director of Development Services shall adjust the fees in this subchapter by the cost of living change, which is CPI for the Seattle area. The new fee schedule shall be filed with the clerk's office. So this is just an administrative change we make. We've done it for several years. We go through downstairs, we calculate the fees. Kim Perrine in the legal department would process it, and it would just take place. This is our code. This is what we can currently do today. And so that's normally done by the 1st of the year. Also in the code, it gives us another option. On a biannual basis, which is twice a year, the mayor shall direct the review of all land use development permit application fees included in this subchapter to determine whether adjustments in fee schedules should be recommended to the City Council for consideration. Proposed fee adjustments shall be made with the intent of meeting the purpose of subsection 1 of this section. That's the section we talked about first, which was reasonable fee increases. So we have some options to go forward. Subsection A, at a future meeting, come back with the annual fee change based on the cost of living change, CPI for the Seattle area of 8.9%. And that number is just through October of this year. There's another number that's coming out, we think around the 12th to the 14th, which will be an updated number for the entire year for the Seattle area. And we would anticipate that would be a couple percentage points lower than what you see there. So that's certainly an option for us. Option 2, the new inflation rate will be released on January 12th that I just mentioned. Come back with the annual fee change based on the cost of living, CPI for the Seattle area, based on newly released information. And so you might wonder why we're saying Seattle area. That's because that's what's in our code. It requires us to compare it to the Seattle area. If you go back to 2009, the U.S. inflation rate dropped, negative 0.4% back during the Great Recession. In 2021, the U.S. inflation rate increased 4.7%. And in 2023, like I said, the new numbers are coming out for the Seattle area. 2022, like I said, it was 8.9%. Option 3. This particular option, if it's chosen, a code change could be prepared that would modify Section A. It would possibly pick a range. It would take the current CPI of the Seattle area, a range between 0% and 4% could be created. This would create a stop so that fees do not drop below 0, because you don't want your fees to go down to a negative, but maybe stop it at 4% or 5% or some other number that you would deem appropriate. That way you have a predictable range every year and you know that it's not going to go up too high, it's not going to go too low. So that's an option, certainly option 3. Option 4, subsection B, and this is the one that allows you to do a study. If this option is chosen, staff recommends hiring an independent firm to conduct a study to analyze the fee schedule and present the findings at a future meeting. The benefit of knowing what our costs actually are is what that would do. So the way you calculate that is, let's say you have a conditional use permit process, and you know that your senior planner works on that for 10 hours for every project, and maybe the techs touch it for 5 hours, and administrative people touch it for 4 hours, doing advertising and SEPA notices and so on and so forth. Maybe I would touch it for 30 minutes. You take all the hours, you add all those up for that particular process, and then you do a study to analyze what everybody's wage is, what everybody in that range is earning. You use employee-related expenses, which includes health benefits and retirement. You do all of your overhead for your building, your trucks, your gas, all that. Add it up to one big number, and then you can figure out exactly what your costs are for each of those processes. So subdivisions, short plats, long plats, conditional use permits, commercial site plans, binding site plans. An example of a site plan might be the Glint Car Wash and Sonic Drive-In down across from Walgreens on Highway 20. Those kinds of processes are what land use permits are. So if you finally figure out what your costs are, you'll find that some of the fees might be too high. For instance, we've heard from the public that they believe our annexation fees are too high at $2,800. So the only way we can know if that annexation fee is too high is if we know what our costs are. So that's the benefit of doing a cost analysis. We think, I talked to Mr. Goldman today, and he's been in touch with one of our vendors who could do this study for us. We don't know exactly what they want to charge for this particular narrow study. It could be $30,000, could be $40,000, could be $50,000. For instance, I think the impact fee analysis would be $100,000. We're not talking about impact fees here. I think for the sewer connection charges, that was, I'm not sure, over $100,000 to have that done. So this would not be as expensive to do. What Blaine and I would like today is, obviously this is just a discussion item, Mr. Mayor, but if we could build a consensus as to what you would like to see done, just like a head nod or, just like a conversation, so we know what direction to go with these 4 options. So that concludes staff presentation. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and we're welcome for any questions.
So this is the only item on the agenda that could have I'm going to reach to the audience to make sure that we don't have somebody that might want to question or comment or be a part of this conversation before I turn to council.
Don't be shy.
So if anybody would like to speak to any of this, now is your opportunity. I assume we have not heard anything from the public.
That's correct, Mayor. We've had no input
Okay.
from the public.
And you're not looking really for any kind of a final answer. No action here. The council. Hand up.
A wise man once said, and I think it was about 11 years ago, he was sitting right there where Chief Merrill's sitting. Judge Hawkins had mentioned, if you want to move the church, or if you want to move the piano from one side of the church to the other, you should do it an inch a Sunday. So where I'm going with that is, I would be okay with doing nothing on this agenda item for now. We just made a fairly dramatic, over 5 years, but just made a fairly dramatic change to the system development charges, and I don't want to change too much at once. If there were an acceptable option in there for me, it would be option 3. I'd probably be okay with 1 to 2% increase annually, but you look at that 8.9 or something, it's just, it's the wrong time to try to even everything out, I would say, with with how a lot of development is already struggling with whether they're going to move forward or not. So that's my thoughts on that. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. Is there a slide that has all 4 options listed by any chance? Like on one screen?
I don't have a
Okay,
slide
no-
with all of them on one slide.
No worries. So, and this is sort of on topic, but, in our code, we use the Seattle CPI as a comparison. We're the ones that write our code. In your professional opinion, would it behoove us to use a different area for comparison, or do you think that that comparison is appropriate? Is that something we need to kind of reevaluate?
My professional opinion is Seattle is a much more expensive market, I think, than Island County. But I'm not sure exactly what factor we would use in Island County.
Okay.
So if I may chime in on that,
Please.
looking at the different CPIs is something that I've done in the past and that I do actively here as well. David Goldman, Finance Director. They had different CPIs for rural versus urban. They used to have like 3 different CPIs for rural counties, but it wasn't specifically for like an island county. It was kind of like West Coast rural below 25,000, West Coast rural between 25 and 50, and so on. They eliminated all that about 8 years ago, I think, at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So right now, they only have 2 that would be rural for the West Coast. It's like, not rural for the West Coast, but it would be like under $1 million and over $1 million. So there's really nothing that really speaks to rural anymore. But as far as looking at different CPIs, the Seattle metropolitan region is the closest thing that we have to capturing the costs for this particular area of the country. Otherwise, we could look at a national one, or we could look at a statewide Washington one. But short of having something specific for Island County available, those would be the other options to take a look at.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I didn't realize that there were so few options for comparison. I think that it's always appropriate to kind of examine our systems and evaluate how we do things and why we do them. And so while I think it's appropriate to ask the questions about what CPI we're using, and while I'm loath to, spend money on too many analyses and studies, I am intrigued by option 4 in terms of determining what our actual cost is, and I think that would probably be the most appropriate factor when determining what the fees are going to be. But everything costs money. It all requires spending money. So I think in the interest of just kind of fact finding and evaluation, it would be doing that study is something I would certainly be interested in. I don't know if I'd be interested in doing that right now. I don't know if we can kind of do a little bit at a time, but that's the direction I'm leaning in. Thanks.
Councilor Stuckey.
Couple questions. The first, is it usual for that big of a deficit to be with development services in other cities? Is that typical? It's not normally self-sustaining anywhere, is it?
I couldn't really say if other cities have that kind of a number. Sometimes you recapture a little more than that. Places I've been a director before, it might be 1.2 million in expenses, and revenues might be 600, 800,000, something like that. But there's no set rule. Basically, you recover whatever your costs are, if you can. But if you do try to go over and charge more than what it costs you to do business on a certain type of fee, the builder associations will sue, and they've been very successful. And so the law says you cannot charge more than it costs you to do business.
And then seeing that this is your department, do you have an opinion on which option is best?
I think option 4 would give us more facts. It'll give us more information so we know exactly what our costs are. I think that would take some time to do, obviously. And so if there's a short-term solution of picking a number, such as the inflation rate when it comes out in January, maybe that's an option, and then take that figure and go forward, and then we'll start working on a plan to do some sort of a study.
Not suggesting you have a ton of time on your hands, but is there any way to do something, a study like this, well, may not be quite as accurate as an independent study internally?
We do have Mr. Goldman, but I don't want to offer his services, so. But he has done that kind of work before.
Well, it would be best to probably obtain the services of an expert for Washington State who has a lot of experience in doing these kind of things and, understanding the different intricacies of the law and what's permitted and what's not permitted and kind of what the baselines are for other places similar in scope and size to Oak Harbor. That might be of a benefit to kind of reaching out to a consultant who has a lot of experience in this area.
I guess for me, I kind of concur with what our Planning Services Director mentioned about waiting for that other number, because it's only a couple weeks away, is it not? January, the slide's not up. So I like the idea of whatever option that was, and I apologize I don't have that slide in front of me, but that's what I would be thinking for myself. Yeah, well, yeah, that one right there would be my option.
Anyone else? Yes, Councilor Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. Our city's gone through a lot of changes, and we are the largest population, but we've also been verified as a rural city, even though we're close to 23,000. But we just have a fire levy to help for safety. We're going to do and should pass the school levy. And our taxes have gone up and some of our salaries have not. And so I think we have to be mindful of the demographics. Yes, we can't lose money, but so far we're holding. You're saying it may go down 2 more points. I think that's too big of a jump with all these other changes that we're going through. I'm sorry, you just can't get blood out of a turnip. And so I would, if we have to do anything, then maybe 1% or 2%. But I would like to see a study, now maybe not the next month or 2, but maybe by June, have a study done and see where we're at, see where the new CPI is and how it's affecting things. And, bond passes, we're not paying any more than we are because they paid it off. And so, but I just think some steadiness, and I think there's a lot of balls in the air. I would rather go, like you, to facts, but I don't want to start, by the middle of January, the 1st of February to hire a consultant. I'd like to see how things even out a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Councilor Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Cool, I too am hesitant to provide an option at this point. The options weren't in our packet, so I really wasn't prepared to weigh in either way. I'm a little concerned about putting too much on the backs of our developers. We have just raised our system development charges. And I too would lean towards waiting till after January 12th to see what the new CPI is. And then I'm curious as to what that study would cost us too. I think having actual numbers is extremely beneficial, but I would hesitate to encourage us to do a study without knowing what that study is going to cost us. So I would appreciate if we could get the options sent to us, and then if we could table this and bring it back at another time for discussion. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think you've heard a variety of things from most of the council up here, but I think that the idea of seeing the actual numbers study costs makes really good sense. And then the land use fees that we're talking about, I think that would benefit council to see those numbers, those particular
Absolutely.
fees, so that, yes.
Councilmember Wiesner
Oh,
has his hand raised.
Okay, we have Councilor Wiesner also, so Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to give my 2 cents on this. You know, I've been kind of adamantly opposed to the automatic rate increase over the last several years because unlike the cap we had placed, you know, upon property taxes, what was happening is those CPI increases happened year after year, whether we had a good year or a bad year in development services, right? And it kind of took some of the control out of away from the council. So, you know, I understand why the regulation was passed back when it was, is because we'd kind of taken our eye off the ball and had not done any development services rate increases for many years, and then we ended up finding ourselves in catch-up mode, right? And we said, well, we're not going to let that happen again. So we're going to make sure that now that we've set these, that we keep up with inflation. But that's been, you know, several years ago. And so I'm with Councilmember Marshall. I think we need more information before making a decision. I lean towards options 3 and options 4 just because the council does have some ability for some flexibility for those adjustments. You know, even in maybe a bad year where we have to exceed the CPI, we would be able to do that within option 3 and option 4. You know, I'm not a big guy on studies. In fact, the idea of hiring another consultant to do a study just kind of makes me cringe. But at the same time, it could be an opportunity to look at our charges within our codes. And like Mr. David said, Mr. Cool said we could then possibly find in some areas where we can shave those up. You know, in keeping with something similar to what we did with our recent development services charges, if we want to continue to emphasize the building of more affordable style homes, and then again, it's that word, right, that we really don't know what it means. But if we want to continue to do that, we don't have a lot of money to dump into that, but we can be doing that through smart development services code. And that includes development services charges, right? Right now, for example, you know, some of our charges are you know, basic, like, you know, I think some of our, you know, short plat charges are, you know, for a short plat between, you know, 2 and 6 lots, right? And maybe we can fine tune that and make it so that we're incentivizing those infill developments again, and again, following the path that we've taken to be putting our money where our mouth is when it comes to the need for more affordable housing in our area, and how do we promote that, and how do we get there, and you know, through option 4, that might be a way to get there. But I think, like Councilmember Marshall said, there's a lot more discussion to be had on this, and such as what the cost of that study look like, and what would the timeline be for that, and you know, what would be the receivables on that, what would be the expectations that come out of that study, and you know, would it be just to look at how much we can raise our rates, or would it be really to look at how we could revamp our rates to continue to deliver that message of, you know, the desirability of more infill and more affordable style housing. So I know that's probably not a nod that you can take and run with, Mr. Cool, but hopefully you get the gist from that. Thank you.
I think I do, Mr. Mayor. I'll work with the city administrator, and we'll schedule a time to come back to you with a little more facts and information for you. And I appreciate the consensus you've shared with us, and I think we're ready to move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Cool. I guess that's...
Mayor, I have one comment.
Okay.
Just to kind of wrap it up here, where we're going. Interesting enough, our code says do this automatic, and it seemed like that was the consensus by council. No one wanted to do the automatic, so you kind of gave us a direction to hold off of that, even though the code does it. Last year's was quite significant too, with the increase. I think it was 6.3. Is that right, our finance director? last year, and this year it's even higher. So there was a really concern by staff whether council wanted to go in that direction, and you just confirmed our kind of hunch here that you probably didn't want to continue with that. And then long-term, I think we need to look at our code and look at tweaking that and get it off that automatic increase if council doesn't always want to do it. It's our own rule, so we can change it as you want to. So, but you kind of gave us permission here with a consensus not to follow the code this year and to hold off on that automatic increase and wait a little bit longer, see what it is, and come back and probably have multiple discussions as we look into ways to tweak it and ways we go in the future. But thank you for the input.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Oborn. Anyone else? Council? Any other business? Councilor Hoffmeyer?
Real quick, I just wanted to mention, we've made it all the way to the end of this meeting here, and there are 24 members in the audience that have stuck it out.
Who's
So
counting?
I just wanted to, reach out to this group. Very good group here. Help be the ears and eyes for council. Each and every one of us, feel free to reach out, call us, email us. Help us continue to make Oak Harbor a better place, and much luck here with the bond. Thank you.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Signify by waving goodbye. Thank you. Thank you.